Hello, welcome to this conversation with the Courier. I'm Bret community editor for the Courier. This is Elizabeth Klaus, our staff writer. We're here talking with Superintendent of Findlay City Schools, Dr. Andrew Hatton.
Yep.
Thanks for coming today.
I appreciate you having me here today.
Absolutely, absolutely. We were just going to get right into it. We want to talk about, specifically today, the 1% earned income tax that's on the ballot here in the spring.
Sure.
Could you give us just a little background about it, just to get us started today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Findlay City Schools is, as you said, back on the ballot in May 6th, and as of today, the filming of this is 19 days away. Early voting started a while back in early April. Mm-hmm. And the reason that we're on the ballot is for operating dollars. Mm-hmm. We've unfortunately been unsuccessful on the ballot now here in Findlay 4 consecutive times. And that dates back to 2020, when we were on the ballot 3 times that year for an increase in, we were on the ballot for that typical millage, property millage. In that particular year, voters said no 3 times to 5.9 mils of increase in, I believe it was May of that year, August of that year in an emergency election, and then in November. Mm-hmm. And then COVID hit, and everyone in the whole country was, struggling with that chaos. And we were able to sustain ourselves at that time with federal dollars. It was federal ESSER dollars, mm-hmm. where we were able to hire some positions, get the materials we needed on that road to recovery, coming out of the COVID chaos, if you will. And but a deficit was looming. In fact, it was Denise Grant from the Courier that year in April of 2020 wrote an article that said if Findlay City Schools is unsuccessful on the May ballot of 2020, they would be facing a $12 million deficit by 2024. And sure enough, the numbers have been the numbers. Things cost more. Inflation, rises in benefits. All of the things that we pay for to operate our district day to day, month to month, week to week. The fuel in the buses, insurance costs, all of those things go up, and our revenues were continuing to go down, and our costs were outpacing revenues. Despite cuts, despite right-sizing the district, despite, people retire or take opportunities elsewhere, and then over time the district was not backfilling those positions. So in 2020, the 23-24 school year, the Board of Education took a year to carefully and thoughtfully look at our financial health. Mm-hmm. And what path might we be able to go to stabilize our budget? So the voters had said no to property taxes 3 times, so they looked at this concept of an income tax, a school income tax, very different from a city municipal tax, a school income tax. And at about this time last year, in 2024, they brought in a school financial expert to look at our financial health. And the recommendation was a 1% earned income tax for several reasons. It would match the deficit. What we would pull in on that 1% earned income tax would almost match that deficit, so to help offset that, stabilize our budget. It would reduce our over-reliance on property taxes. Property taxes in the state of Ohio is the primary way that schools are funded. And actually, that system was found unconstitutional multiple times back in the late 90s. And so the state put together there's another way to generate income, which would be through income tax. So that as they continue to look at that, it would diversify the revenue stream. And one of the things that was most important to our Board of Education was they looked at the residents of our school district and noticed that nearly 30% of our residents are on fixed incomes. An earned income tax for schools would not impact those on fixed incomes. So with all of that in mind, we were on the ballot in November. Unfortunately, we were unsuccessful in November, roughly 52 to 48. That was a loss. The board regrouped. We regrouped by listening to community members over the holidays. And there's a very tight window of time to get back on the ballot for May. So in January, the board asked our treasurer to take a look at, okay, what would a 1% bring in at this point? You have to send that down to the state to get that certified. And the board resolved to cut $6 million out of our operating budget in the next school year, in 25-26. So that's why we're on the ballot again here in May.
Prior to 2020 and attempting to be on the ballot, what specific financial decisions and factors kind of led to this financial crisis, and were any corrective measures or actions taken before 2020 to kind of reverse or stall this looming deficit?
Yeah, slow it down, right? So we always have to live within our means in public education. There's really no mechanism for a school district to not do that, because you're always submitting your 5-year forecast, you're submitting your financial plans to the state and to the community. And if the state says, hey, you're starting to live outside your means, we notice your deficit spending, we notice you haven't passed a levy in a while, you have to provide what's called a written plan to the state of Ohio, which Pam Harrington has had to do the last couple of years. And what happens is you get into these positions of fiscal watch, fiscal emergency, and then at some point, if you can't stabilize your budget, you go into fiscal takeover. The state will come take you over. So let's rewind then to 2004, which is the last time that voters approved new operating dollars here in Findlay City Schools. So in 2004, we were able to stabilize the budget. We were able to provide cost of living increases to our amazing teachers, because the preponderance of the operating bucket is salaries and benefits. So then as we start to move forward, we also were able to build new schools, the 2 new middle schools and then the Millstream Career Center. But that was bond money. That's separate from the operating money. So then you get into, now we are in 2012, 2013, 2014. I believe a renewal passed in 2017, but that wouldn't capture new money. That wouldn't capture new dollars. So the way that we are over-reliant on operating dollars that come through property taxes, as property values go up, the collection rates go down, and schools are held flat to what the voters passed back in 2004. So that understanding is critical. And one of the things that's very confusing for our listeners and our viewers here is that, well, but wait, my property value's gone up. Are you not getting more money? Well, every 3 to 6 years, the reevaluations take place of property values, right? And some property, and then they have an average of all the properties that have gone up. If you're above the average, you pay a little more to the school district. If your property value went up but you're below the average, you actually pay a little less to the school districts. So that's how we're held flat. So then to your question, what corrective measures were taken? Starting around 2013, 2014, 2015, I've been digging through the historical records, what was done. Because we were relatively stable financially. They stretched the dollars, those new dollars from 2004, they stretched them to about 2013-14. But that's where we noticed academic achievement really starting to drop off. Why is that? People were leaving, retiring, and we were starting to not backfill positions. While enrollment was dropping as well, from over the last 20 years, enrollment has dropped across the whole state, across Hancock County, but definitely also here in Findlay City Schools. The Board of Education was right-sizing the staff to match the number of students that we had. So that would shrink the expenditures a bit, right? If you're not paying, the average, let's just say teacher cost to district is about $50,000. $50,000 to $55,000 salary and benefits. So that starts to shrink. There are examples, another little anecdote I could give you would be in the operations with the bus garage. We used to have 3 mechanics working on our buses, making sure they're safe, we're doing our own tire rotations, the brake jobs, all of that. Those mechanics left and we never backfilled those positions. Which actually, nowadays, it's more expensive to outsource that. You want to have your own people. So we're actually trying to bring back mechanics. Schools were closed. Washington, Jacobs, Lincoln, and then the Board of Education did everything it could to right-size the district on facilities and just continue to shrink and cut, but then we hit a point where we just cannot cut our way to excellence anymore.
So having this be a permanent 1% earned income tax, was there ever a consideration for setting a time limit or maybe a lower rate, but instead of earned an overall income? Was there any consideration for these different options?
Yeah, so after we failed in November, right? Yeah. So the Board of Education, like I said, in December and January, really thought about those very things. You know, maybe we asked for 1% because that's exactly what was needed. It wasn't more than what was needed. It was just to stabilize our budget. We weren't going to go on a hiring spree once we stabilized that budget. And so the hope was we would intentionally not be back on the ballot for about 7 to 10 years, maybe even longer, because hopefully our economy continues to grow, wages go up, and then that way that 1% earned income tax would help offset and help us grow. So the thought was, we said what we needed, and we were clear with what was needed, and so the need hasn't changed. In fact, now the need is even greater. The longer we go, the need continues to grow. So that was one main reason that the Board of Education said, you know what, we're gonna keep it to 1%. To your point about adjusting the cost down, also permanent. That was the other part of the question. You know, permanent rather than maybe we just go out 5 years. Maybe, you know, they thought that through. Well, over time, the cost of everything continues to go up. So the need is going to continue to go up. It's never going to go down in our society. So the need is always going to be there. It was to stabilize the budget. We weren't asking for more than what was needed. And then the other thing that was different this time around was this committing to $6 million in cuts for the 25-26 school year. So even if we pass in May, we will have to live with that $6 million in cuts for one fiscal year. And then I am actually recommending to the Board of Education that about $1 million of those cuts remain permanent. I think we can tighten our belts and live within our means, and I do believe that about $1 million of the way we currently spend money can be eliminated.
So the $6 million already mentioned is going to happen next school year.
That's correct.
For
So,
sure.
so the board in January adopted a resolution. So we're resolved to make these cuts. In the February board meeting, March board meeting, we made the first they voted on the first $1 million in cuts. It was administrators primarily, and some programmatic changes, the way we approach math at the middle school, for example. More cuts will be coming in May and in June, pass or fail, because we must live with that $6 million in cuts for 1 year.
That $1 million that you're recommending remains permanent. Do you have an estimate of what those positions would be, what that would entail?
So one of the things that we are going to be doing differently going into the next school year is at the middle school, we all remember our class periods, and the bell would ring, and we go from math to science to social studies and reading language arts. In Findlay, for a long time, we have taken 2 class periods and blocked them together for mathematics. That is a significant investment in mathematics at the middle school level, which is great. When you do that, you need double the number of math teachers to make that happen. So we had about 14 teachers across both of our middle schools teaching math. So by unblocking math and making it 1 period, then you only need half of those positions to execute math throughout the day. So one of my recommendations is that we do not go back to blocking math. Another one was coming out of the COVID chaos that I referenced earlier. The Board of Education had a strong commitment to keeping kindergarten, first grade, and second grade class sizes small. And when I say small, like 18, 19, maybe 20 maximum, for really implementing new curriculum around the science of reading, putting our value down on early literacy and early numeracy. And I think that was the right decision to do over the last 5 to 6 years. Unfortunately, we're going to be eliminating about 16 positions at the elementary division, which are going to make those class sizes go up a little bit. So we might be looking at 20, 21, 22 in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, which is still, I think we can do a very effective job with that. And so that would be another example of something that I would say that once we stabilize our budget, we're able to collect that money fully in 18 months. I would not recommend bringing back positions to drive those class sizes back down. So those are 2 examples.
So with that 6 million in cuts for the following school year,
Mhm.
15 support staff, 27 teacher positions are on the chopping block, so to say.
Mhm.
Are any administrative positions and or salaries, are they going to be affected by these cuts, or how is that prioritized?
Mhm. So actually, as I said a moment ago, the cuts that have already been approved, the first cuts were administrators. In fact, it was a total of 6 administrative positions, 4 that are current, 2 others that were built into the forecast that we did not backfill. So one example would be a director of transportation position. We blended that with our facilities person, so he is doing facilities and transportation. Because when you go down administrative services in a district of over 5,000 students, you have to start spinning multiple plates, unfortunately. And so the other thing with the total of 6 administrative positions, that's the largest percentage of cuts out of any division in our whole team. So when we look at teachers, when we look at support staff, when we look at administrators, administration is going to be cut by 15%. That's the largest by percentage out of any division that we have. And those cuts have already been made. Unfortunately, I've met with those people, let them know that those positions won't be there. And those were the first cuts that I recommended to the Board of Education, and those have already taken place. And the other thing that I'd like to add to that, though, just to give our listeners some perspective here in Findlay. When I got here a year and a half ago, when I got here 2 years ago, and I've had the pleasure over 28 years to serve in 4 other districts, in a district of our size, I said, where are the administrators? We were already short numerous administrative positions here in our district. They had not backfilled certain positions, and now we're going to be cutting another 15%. We are already in the bottom 15% in the whole state on administrative compensation. That's not where we want to be. Our district, even though we've recently received 4.5 stars on the state report card and 4 stars on the state report card, we're exceeding state standards on the state report card, but we're not exceeding the standards and expectations for here in the city of Findlay. And it takes administrative services. Now, one of the things that I want to do much better moving forward is telling the story of what administrators do, because we keep thinking about, well, back in my day, well, I went to school in the 70s and early 80s, and it's different. School is different. Public education is different than it was, and it's highly complex, and there is a lot of reporting. There's a lot of things that we do as administrators so that teachers can work their magic in the classroom. And so this is going to be a significant hit. That 15% reduction is going to be a significant hit to the services we're able to provide our teachers and our kids and our community.
Some voters have questioned, at the last town hall, for example, that the district has overhired in previous years and has incorporated roles that maybe weren't around before, such as the alumni coordinator position.
Yep.
How does the district respond to these concerns, and what justifications can be given for the importance of these positions?
Yeah, I heard that question, and those are great questions, and this is where we've got to continue to drive the clarity around the bigger vision and future that we see for Findlay City Schools to be an elite school district, not only for our community and our kids, but in the region. I would totally, just respectfully reject the premise that we have overhired. Again, we were already short administrators, and we're in the bottom 15% of administrative compensation in the whole state. We want to make sure that we're hiring and retaining the best people. The vision behind the coordinator of development and alumni relations was that we have a very energized alumni base. We have proud alumni that live all over the country. We have a Super Bowl winning quarterback that is an alumni. We have a Tony Award winning actor who unfortunately recently passed away, and we just celebrated his life in Gavin Creel. We produce amazing scientists, mathematicians, politicians right here in the city of Findlay. And so one of the things that the Board of Education wanted to see was some alumni didn't know what was going on and how they can reconnect and then reinvest and pay it back to the school district that they love so much. Coordinators of development, honestly, Findlay City Schools is a little bit behind in this area. Establishing a school foundation, many districts, in fact here in Hancock County, in Northwest Ohio, Central Ohio, have almost established endowments so that they can provide the extras, and then it does not burden the taxpayer. And we can create grants for our teachers, extra opportunities that are for our students that are just highly unique that other students are not going to be able to attain in other districts. And so the vision was to, again, diversify our revenue streams, build up a foundation that can become an endowment, earning interest for the success and long-term stability of the opportunities that we provide in Findlay City Schools.
Voters in Ohio have rejected many school levies. A lot of schools are struggling in getting these approved. Do you think school districts, including Findlay, have lost public trust, and what has the school done to kind of rebuild that trust?
So, in the state of Ohio, over 90% of all students, all children, attend public school. Public education is what separates the United States from the rest of the world. Public education, when we go to register students, whether they have learning disabilities, physical disabilities, regardless of their background, if they're homeless, if they're in foster care, if they're highly gifted, if they're twice exceptional, meaning they might have a learning disability but they're also cognitively gifted, we take all students. Unlike private or parochial schools, they can have specific criteria for their registration. So we are very proud in the state of Ohio. Like I said, over 90% of all students attend public schools, and we believe that we're the backbone of every community and of our state. And so when we look at, in terms of public trust, I think we're in a moment as a country. We've gone from cynicism or skepticism, which is healthy skepticism. We should be questioned on what we do. We should be questioned on how we spend dollars. We should be questioned on our curriculum, because we should be working together as a community to provide the best world-class education for our students. But we've gotten to a point of skepticism, and like you said, this lack of trust is very palpable across the whole state. Last fall, to your point, Ohio had the most issues on the ballot for schools in all of the United States. And part of that is a byproduct of our funding system, which they are still, trying to clean up and fix, which I could talk about in a moment. A record number of renewals failed in Ohio last fall. To your point about trust, that's unprecedented. It just had never happened, because when a district renews a levy, that's not an increase. That's just renewing what what taxpayers have already been doing. Like on those, like you proposed a moment ago, like a 5-year limitation. Well, okay, we're just going to renew this. A record number failed. So why is that? And is it just in public schools? I don't think so. I think that when we've looked at questioning institutions of science and medicine, questioning media, right? I'm sure you felt it in your world. Questioning public schools. Again, questioning and cynicism or skepticism and trying to get to truth and facts, let's do that together. But when it's just, the other thing that we battle nowadays is a lot of misinformation and things that just are not factually true.
Right.
And so what we are trying to do in Findlay City Schools is tell our story, be open with our story, lean into the facts, lean into transparency. And I've really appreciated all the feedback I've gotten over the last 2 years about where we could do better. And it really, what I've learned in this time, and I'm very open to continuing this, is it takes a lot of conversations like this. Sitting down face to face and saying, oh, I didn't realize that. We have blind spots. That we made assumptions for so long where we just had public trust, and we're in a different day and age now. So we're battling social media. Misinformation, I think it's been proven, spreads at like 2 or 3 times the rate of factual information on social media. So we don't want to be in a position where we're constantly playing defense. We want to start playing offense with our community, driving clarity around our amazing curriculum, driving clarity around, you know what, in the United States, we did not teach reading properly for the last 30 years, and there's a lot, in fact, it was called the reading wars. It was that deep. and it was felt so strongly in a lot of school districts, especially here in Ohio. We need to lean into, you know what, we've got to do better. And here's what we're going to do with our curriculum and how we're going to approach the teaching of reading. Here's how we're going to do better with approaching our financial health, our fiscal health. Here's how we've got to be, I've received a lot of emails in the last 6 months. Hey, I'm in very much support of this, but could you do better with being transparent with your revenue stream, how you're spending money? Yes. And so we are going to continue, I'm very hopeful that the Board of Education is successful on May 6th. But my commitment to the community and the Board of Education commitment to the community is that we want to continue with focus groups. We want to continue with town hall meetings. We want to continue listening and learning from our community. How can we do better as we all lock arms? Because I think one thing that we all agree on is that the children are the future. Even people that have spoken out as they have the right to against the levy, they do believe in children. They do believe in public education. They just want to be a part of it. They want to be heard, and they want to make sure that we're being transparent.
So this doesn't end with just the levy then?
It does not end. When you say this, what do you mean?
Getting the word out, having town halls,
Correct.
Speaking with people.
Speaking with people. I take, I've been trying to do this new thing, taking office hours out into the community, coffee and conversation with Dr. Hatton. And I've been going to, whether it's We Serve, Coffee Amici, Baker's Cafe. Yesterday, I was at Panera out on the east, and I sat down with a table of citizens who had already early voted. Almost all of them were former teachers and secretaries and had served in our school district for years. But it's not over. Those will continue because we never want to be in a position where we are here to serve the public. Mm-hmm. We are here to serve children. And the best way we can do that is to listen and learn, but also drive clarity around we have a lot of expertise in our school district. We have people with bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, doctorate degrees, decades of expertise. We also believe that we're on a journey of always getting better and always improving. In that way, in that vein though, no, the town halls, the coffee and conversation, the listening sessions, we want to continue to lock arms with our community to build that trust and be transparent.
The average household income in Findlay, according to the United States Census Bureau, is around $57,000. Mm-hmm. With the city of Findlay already collecting income tax from residents and the school asking for an additional 1% earned, the average person could expect to pay $1,140 for both taxes annually.
That's combined?
Combined, yes.
Okay.
What would you say to taxpayers who are hesitant with adding this financial burden, and why would you say the investment is worth it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No one wants to be in the position to be out in their neighborhoods, in their community, because I've also gone to homes and done what we're calling fireside chats and say, hey, I'm asking to raise your taxes. Mm-hmm. I don't want to raise my own taxes. I will be paying this 1%. I'm voting for this, and I will be raising my own taxes here in Findlay. I'll be paying this 1% earned income tax. What would I say to voters? I referenced, I think I tipped my hat to how old I am. But when I was a little kid in the late 70s, I stood in unemployment lines with my dad. And I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck. I know what it's like to say, are we gonna, do we have enough for food and clothing and, medicine and all of that? And because there are many people, you gave the average, there are many people that, and I've seen like, hey, for the average, this is like $10 a week. That's a pizza. Mm-hmm. But that pizza is dinner on Friday night for my 5 family members, and I don't have the $10 to send to the schools. I don't have another $10 to send to the city. These are tough times for everybody, and I know that the federal government's dealing, with a lot on trying to make sure we have economic viability. Our city is very proud of its economic viability. 11 years in a row as the nation's #1 micropolitan. As I stated, over 90% of the students in Ohio attend public schools, and I believe that this needs to be looked at. So what I would say to voters is this needs to be looked at as an investment in the short term and long term of our property values, of our economic viability. An educated populace is what separates us from the rest of the world. Everyone being able to read and think at high levels is what separates us from the rest of the world. We need a highly educated workforce. That's what separates us from the rest of the world. And that's what Findlay City Schools, that's the promise that we have to deliver on. So I know it's painful, I know it's difficult. Where we are a little different than the city tax, because you did mention that, so if I could speak to that. People on fixed incomes, so if you're only living on Social Security, you would not pay this tax. If you're only living on, like you're on disability right now or workers' comp and you're only receiving alimony because of your life situation, none of those are taxed. This is only if you're receiving an earned income. And so again, it's hard because investing in something like education, we don't even see the fruits of that labor for years until our graduates start pouring back into the system, right? So it's difficult to see, but what I would just implore our voters, people who I think here in Findlay, love Trojan country, love the United States, and love our democracy, investing in public education is what sets us apart from the rest of the world, and we have to keep investing in it.
So if this levy passes and it reaches the $13 million that's needed to address the deficit, how does the district plan to allocate this additional funding generated from the permanent levy moving forward, and what actions will the district take in ensuring transparency and accountability and how the funds are spent?
Okay, that's a long question.
Sorry, you can break
That's
it
a
up
really
into
long
more.
question. No, I'm kidding. But it's conversational, right? So if I miss any parts here, just let me know. One of the things that I wanted to say also to clarify around this, so how we will spend the money, that's the big, right? And again, in the spirit of continuing to earn trust in our community. The other thing that I really want the community to know and understand is that, again, I'm hopeful that we're successful in May. When we're successful, we will not fully collect for 18 months. So that's why the cuts have to be in place for about a year. The other thing where there's uncertainty in the state of Ohio is that House Bill 96 has gotten through the House and is now in the Senate. And I know that they're on a 2-week recess right now. There are significant changes coming to public education. Right now there's uncertainty because the draft that we've seen could have Findlay City Schools in this moment, as we are asking our community, hey, please support us, lock arms with us. We are looking at potentially losing another $300,000 to $800,000 out of our budget. Loveland Schools down in Cincinnati is looking at minus $2.3 million. For some reason, we are continuing to look at not being fully funded. And that's very disappointing because in the state of Ohio, they had locked arms years ago, bipartisan effort to have the Fair School Funding Act and the Fair School Funding Formula. And right now we're living through year 4 of that implementation. We're being told that year 5 is not going to happen. Year 6 is not going to happen. And that's challenging because as we are looking at looming deficits, as some school districts are in very different financial states. Their 5-year forecast is positive. They are not deficit spending. There are issues with, like I said, the House bill that regulates those property taxes. There are some school districts that are gaining property as valuations go up, they're gaining that. And they didn't have reasonable pieces in place. So there's also about 20 or 30 bills out there right now that are going to readjust property tax collections. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and I really need the citizens of Findlay to dial in and take a look at that, because we've been saying, hey, support us on May 6th, and we are hopefully not going to be on the ballot for operating dollars for quite some time. The unknown and potential instability that we might have coming from the state could have us back on the ballot much sooner than we wanted to be, and that's an uncertainty, and we will not know until June 30th. So to answer your question, when we are able to stabilize our budget, the operating bucket goes to operating our district day to day, month to month, year to year. So that's utility bills, that's salaries and benefits. Oh, by the way, this summer, utility bills are expected to go up 20% in the summer of 24 and summer of 25 and the summer of 26. So that's another unexpected cost increase that we did not expect. Combine that with the unknown from the state. So, in our comparable districts, our starting base salary for our teachers is absolutely one of the lowest. We're already in the bottom 15% in compensation for administrators. I am worried that we are going to lose great teachers and great administrators if we can't compete. So we are going to be negotiating a new contract, not this year. It's looking like just about everyone in Findlay City Schools is going to be taking a pay freeze going into next year. But when we negotiate, I want to make sure we're taking care of our teachers, our paraprofessionals, our custodians, our food service people, our bus drivers, our school psychologists, our support staff, everyone, and our administrators. So we are going to be looking at salaries and benefits. But we also are going to be looking at our curricular resources. That's where operating dollars go. And the other thing that I want to make very clear is that we rank in very high with our comparable districts. In fact, I think it's like 6th out of our top 40 most comparable districts. Our over 74% of our dollars go directly into the classroom. So it doesn't get much better than that. So when people are asking, when our viewers are asking, like, gosh, how are they going to spend the money? We are spending it on the resources that impact kids in the classroom.
And will that information be available to the public if the levy passes and how the funds are spent?
Mm-hmm. That information is available now. It's on our website now, and then you can get into, it's called the CUP report. You can get into the really granular way we spend our money on every line. What we're striving to do right now, pass or fail, I'm hopeful that we pass, is that we are going to continue to make it as clear and accessible to any lay person that looks at our budget. How much are you bringing in? How much are you spending? And how are you spending it? Mm-hmm.
So if the levy fails,
Mm-hmm.
and there's that unknown from the state,
Mm-hmm.
what would you project the school district's finances to be like if it fails?
Yeah, this is something that I don't like to think about too much. I always like to stay optimistic, and everybody knows I'm about belief and hope in our community. If we're unsuccessful in May, and that's one of those moments where the voters are going to say, a second time, because it was stated at City Council the other night, are you listening to the voters? Are you listening to the voters? And I would say, yes, we are listening to the voters. We are simply and humbly and respectfully saying, are the voters listening to what the facts have been? And I go clear back to Denise Grant's article in 2020. If we're unsuccessful in 2020, the district is looking at a $12 million deficit. We've been saying the same things for 5 years. We've been making cuts for 5 years. We've been closing buildings. We've been right-sizing the district. There comes a point in time when you just cannot continue to make those kind of cuts and have a successful school district. And so if we're unsuccessful in the short term, my recommendation on May 7th to the Board of Education would be we need to be on the ballot in November. We have to keep fighting and advocating and driving clarity around why the dollars are needed so that we can maintain and then start to reach the expectations of a high-quality public education here in Findlay City Schools. So that would be the first step. Unfortunately, if we were to be unsuccessful in May and November, then we would be in a position where, let's fast forward to January of 26, we would be looking at making recommendations of another $5 million. That's going to be more teachers, more administrators. I think that, one of the things that we looked at was, would we have to go to a half-day kindergarten? Because again, that could shrink that part of the workforce down by half. We would have to make significant cuts. If we continue to be unsuccessful and we're not able to stabilize our budget, then we have to get to that 13 million in cuts so that we don't have a fiscal takeover by the state. And one of the ways I paint this picture would be, think of a high school that would only be offering the bare minimum to graduate. Imagine very few or no extracurriculars, or extracurriculars have to be fully paid for by families, which could be over $800 per activity, to pay for busing and security and custodial and all of the supplementals it takes, the referees, all of the things that it takes that goes into these amazing opportunities that we offer our students. It would be a district of very limited opportunities and very basic educational opportunities so that we just make sure that we are meeting the state minimums to graduate our students. Honestly, I just say it's pretty bleak. Yeah.
So if the levy went back on for November, would it be the same levy, or would it be maybe listen to voters? How would that work?
Yeah. Well, again, we are listening to the voters,
Yes.
and I understand and I respect that. It would be about the advocacy. What do the children need? What does the district need to stabilize its budget? And it's the 1%. Otherwise, I mean, we could go back to maybe looking at property. We could look at and consider making it time bound. Although, as we've stated, costs are going to continue to go up. Like I said, utilities this summer are now projected to go up 20% here in our community. I think it would be completely up to the Board of Education. My recommendation, I can tell you right now, would be this is what the children need and this is what the staff needs to maintain and then grow into the expectations that are expected here. I would recommend the 1% again.
Would a 0.5 income tax generate an equivalent amount to a 1% earned, or how would that work?
I've not run those numbers. I don't know. I know that it would definitely be more because, for example, the city's 1% municipal tax, and we have to keep in mind that's taxing anyone who lives here or works here, raises 30 to 35 million a year depending on the income that year. This 1% would only be the 12 to 13 million. That's an interesting question that I think that we could take to the Board of Education. We are an aging community as well. That was another piece of the calculus that the Board of Education took into account. We didn't want to impact our senior citizens who have paid their dues early in life through their property taxes, who have gone through Findlay City Schools, love their schools, want to support their schools, but they're on fixed incomes. Again, 30% of our residents that live within the school district boundaries are on fixed incomes. So while it could be a lesser number, a 0.5 traditional school income tax would tax everyone. And I just don't know if that's the equitable approach that our Board of Education wanted to take. Yeah.
So to reiterate, you touched on it a little bit.
Yeah.
So if it passes, the tax doesn't start collecting till January of next year, is that correct?
Correct. It just starts to accumulate in January, and I believe the way it works, we would not receive a first collection until April of 2026.
And that is why the $6 million in cuts has to happen?
Right. And that would only be a fraction of the total collection. Again, we pass in May, you start in January, it takes 18 months to start fully collecting. Yeah. So we wouldn't even realize it until 27, fully. Yeah.
Well, that is all the questions I had for you, Dr. Hatton.
Okay. Well, I really want to thank you for setting this up because we want to keep the dialogue going with your viewers and with the citizens here in Findlay. We have so many amazing things that go on in Findlay City Schools. We're getting ready to have graduation here at the end of May. We're going to have just over 355 seniors going on to do amazing things right away in the workforce or in the armed services or in 2-year colleges, 4-year colleges. And Trojan Pride is really felt at this time of year. We are so proud of our athletes that are competing in the spring. I think our baseball team is either undefeated or only has 1 loss. Softball team is winning. Lacrosse is doing great. Our We the People organization, government competition class that won the states again, went out to nationals. We just had a student a month ago perform with the Toledo Symphony. Our Findlay First Edition, our amazing show choir, just competed at nationals and was most improved, best costumes, and was moved up to second runner-up. These are the things that we are so proud of in Findlay City Schools, and the opportunities that we can offer our students are just really second to none in this area, and that's why we just really want to lock arms with our community and make sure that we can move forward to meet their expectations.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much again, Dr. Hatton, for joining us and continue to get the word out and talking about this big issue in our community. And thank you to everyone watching. This has been a conversation with Courier.
I'll come back anytime.
Thank you.
Yep,
Appreciate
thanks.
it.